Started and just start by welcoming a dear old friend to the Grateful Giraffe Cast. Erwin, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to reconnect after a few months, especially since I'm in a different part of the planet now and not in the normal New York City vibes or the playa, you know, one or the other.
Yes, you seem a lot more chill on an island in the Philippines. And, um, I'd love to just jump right in. So today we're here to talk about high performance gratitude.
hmm
And how gratitude can enhance your performance, whether in business or sports or entertainment. But we'd first love to get to know you a little bit more deeply and how your journey and path took you in the direction of high performance gratitude.
Well, it's been a journey, is exactly that's what it's described as. For a long time growing up in the Philippines, there's a sense of gratefulness that we are born with. You walk outside the door and you see the difference between those who have and those who have not. And it's one of those reality checks that from an early age you have to realize where you stand and be okay with where you stand. But also being grateful for the opportunities to be where you are, and then find a way to then be of service if you find yourself luckier than other people. And so I think that's always been inherently in me. Combine that with the fact that mindfulness has been in my life since I was 7 years old through martial arts. Now there's that combination between, you know, being grateful, wanting to be in service, but also using stillness and groundedness to get you to really the path that where it leads. And so I think it was fascinating because my goal was always, since I was a little boy, to find myself working in sports, whether that was in, whether that's one of, I remember the time when I was, um, maybe 8. And that was the first time I saw a newscaster on CNN Sports, Fred Hickman, do something funny with regards to sports when broadcasting it. But I think as I grew up, I was trying to figure out whether I should be in that world or be in another world, and what are my skills and strengths. And, you know, uh, as a Filipino and as a servant, how can I then do that? And I found that being in the medical world, but in a way that serves people right, but also allows me to fulfill a dream of being in sport would be my path. And so, I did the rigors, I went to school, I found the right internships, I went to the conferences, created a network, and then was lucky enough to get an opportunity in Major League Baseball. And then that opportunity led me to a time of self-discovery for 2 years. And then in turn, got me an opportunity in New York with the Knicks. And lucky enough, the choice was because a guy who I admire for a long time, Phil Jackson, who was my idol, who was one of the first guys to really bring the world of mindfulness into sport, was not only my boss, but was willing to be my mentor. And so um, it was an interesting journey for me to get to sport, and how then I bring this sense of same thing that Phil did, but in a modern sense, because I think a lot of the players thought Phil was really old school, even though he brought this kind of new age stuff. It was still old school. His method was, and I brought in this newness of using apps and how to make things quicker because attention spans are slower. Um, but at the same time, there's still some missing piece. And I was in a relationship in 2015 with somebody who was from my Mind Valley community, and I'd been part of the Mind Valley community since 2013. And she was somebody that always asked me. It was funny when we were together. She asked me, and I remember this being at the playa in Burning Man, and we were in the little RV, and we were at a little perch on top of the RV, and she says like, "Hey, so what are you grateful? What are 3 things you're grateful for, and why?" And I'm like, well, I'm Filipino. I'm always grateful. We live gratitude. If you come to the Philippines, you'll see people smile every day, even though they have nothing, because they're grateful to merely be alive. And for those who have something, they're grateful for the fact that they can serve others. And it's in me. So no, 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 no. I mean, now like, what are you grateful for now? And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. It's like, wow, like now you're bringing my mindfulness practice with gratitude, and it's just, okay, cool. Yeah. So it became something we did every day. And what she made me realize that you have to have a reason why you're grateful, and not just to say that you're grateful, you have gratitude, because it just goes one ear and goes out the other. And so when we ended up, parting ways in 2016, it was one of the things that was missing in my life. And so starting 2016 or 2016 or 2015, I'm confused with which dates it was. Um, just that missing piece, and I think forced me to then hold myself accountable for not just what I was grateful every day, but why. And so daily gratitude started that. And I started daily gratitude in May of 2015 or 2016. And every single day I would post something on Instagram of what I'm grateful for, but also why. Fast forward to working with the Knicks, and being able to now have carte blanche of what I wanted to do, thanks to what Phil has allowed me to do, but also David Fisdale, when he gave me, in a sense, the reins to be the wellness lead for the Knicks. And part of that programming was incorporating gratitude in a scientific sense, to then see if that affected how athletes worked on the court and off the court. And so that then became a method, in a sense, of what, as you could call now, in a sense, high performance gratitude, where bringing that sense of stillness, of presence, but also bring the element of gratitude. And so that really started that spin for me. And when pandemic hit, I discovered positive psychology, and ended up, was part of the first cohort of University of Pennsylvania's certificate of applied positive psychology, which was a little like a dip down from their master's program, because they wanted to create an online version fully. And so I was one of the first cohorts that joined that, because I found that this was amazing, where you can study this stuff and have science to really back it up, even though I'd already been doing research on it anecdotally by myself for 5 years prior. And so that's kind of how it all kind of started. But being lucky enough to have a platform to use it on a daily basis was, I think, my biggest gift that was given to me. It's like I could actually practice this like on the spot, whatever I was learning through the research that we were doing, through the research I was personally doing, and through the research I was reading, and the applications for it, really was able to like practice. Did it work? Did it not work? Okay, what are the types of guys that then would be good with doing this gratitude practice? What guys wouldn't? And that became kind of like, in a sense, what it is now. What, funny enough, the title is which is really high performance gratitude.
Amazing story. So many questions. One of them is just, practically implementing, this gratitude protocol, or however you were designing it. What were some of the things that surprised you? What were some of the things that you thought would work but didn't work? Maybe that you thought wouldn't work but that did work. Just, in the wild, how did you see some of these, practices play out and affect performance, short term, long term? Would love to hear some of the, reflections.
There's so many insights, and the biggest insight and the biggest takeaway, somebody always asks me, so for all the years of you work in professional sports, what's the biggest takeaway that you have? And for me, it boiled down to this one phrase, this one thought process, is that we, as gurus, as Sherpas, as teachers, as mentors, all we have the true capability to do is to plant seeds. All we are farmers, gardeners, in a sense. We can't be responsible or force the plant to grow, nor can we kind of accelerate that on our side. That process of growth has to come from the plant itself, or obviously metaphorically, it's our students, it's the people that we serve. And in the case of gratitude, even with the understanding of what being grateful means, being able to harness that isn't just something that I would teach them or see if I can help them incorporate that on their daily basis in order for, I guess, their success, whether that's in their personal life or professional life, to occur. But it's for them to understand how that occurs for them. And that for me was the biggest lesson. And for me to be literally just to plant the seeds and be like, okay, I'm gonna.
Hold up, Erwin. I may have lost you at plant the seeds. Minling, do you see a frozen Erwin, or is that just me?
It's frozen.
Cool. Well, it's a good frozen shot. Give Erwin that. Um, Perhaps I'll text.
Sending energy right there with his hands.
Exactly,
Gratitude.
exactly.
He's sending us love.
Let me just shoot him a text. Okay, so today Minling will be interviewing me about Grateful Giraffes. No, just kidding. Okay,
I'm
cool.
sure he'll return.
Erwin's back. Hey, Erwin, I'm gonna reboost you. That's the island Wi-Fi. We lost you at you had talked about planting the seeds, watching them grow, but then you were just about to talk about planting the seeds once again, and then we got frozen. So
Oh wow. I was like, wow, what was happening there? I was like on a roll and it just like
planted one too many seeds, and the internet
yeah. The internet was like, okay, that's way too many seeds. Chill out first. Just grow one. Just grow one. Um and I was yes, exactly. The energy was felt and it was just too much to handle. It was too hot to handle.
So we can continue from where we think it got frozen. If you remember kind of where that was, or I can kind of go one step
Yeah.
deeper.
No, that's good. I think we were at the point I was explaining, you were asking how, how would that you then integrate that, so to speak, or what were the successes? And so for me, one of the things that I found is that, as I said, I think it's all about planting the seeds first and allowing that seed to grow on its own and being there to support that growth, but not as a choke holder to let that grow and but rather to be away. And when that metaphorically, if that plant needs help, then you're there to support it. And so that's for the first thing. Second thing is that not everyone is in the same time frame or timeline of openness. And
Yeah.
so the biggest key is to really understand where that person is. And so is this the right time to integrate that? Is this the right time to share this latest update as it relates to, how to use gratitude to find success? And then lastly, one of the things that I've learned as well is that you have to tap into the middle line of being scientific enough to be able to give them validity to believe you and trust you, but also have that side of where the art is of being able to explain things in the most common or normal or simple way. And finding that middle ground is the key for the athletes or the other high performers. I've also worked with artists with regards to like musical artists, dance artists, performance artists as well, pop stars and all that stuff, singers. And so it's been, and then also obviously the business sector and the CEOs and startup people. And so it's having to find the middle ground of how they receive things so that then they don't feel that they can't trust you because you're either too highbrow for them or too low. So being that middle ground and finding both the art and the science and the middle allows for the people that I've worked with to be able to then find that success. And so not everything works cookie cutter, as with everything in life. So I guess I think I think the most simple thing to explain is the fact that everything is highly individualized, I guess the right word.
So, we totally agree with that philosophy. As the giraffes, we say, are spiritually yet grounded. So we have, that head in the clouds, feet on the ground metaphor. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a key, especially when you're talking to high performers, is feeling kind of that balance and creating that bridge. Practically speaking though, what did you have people do on a group level? What did you have people do on an individual level? And how did you customize, these plans based on where an individual is at? If someone's never practiced it before, how would they start? If someone's been keeping a journal for a few years, how would they start? I would love to hear, just the curriculum a little bit more.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, the first thing starts with the basics. I think for those who have never brought gratitude in their life, I ask them, what's your real exposure to it? And they say, oh yeah, I've said like I've tried to do a journal, or like, oh, I tried to like ask these questions, but really, okay, let's keep it simple, stupid. What do you do when you first wake up in the morning? And I say this is because when you wake up in the morning, that's when your body is still willing to really accept everything fully, especially when your head is, as you said, kind of still in the clouds or in a dream. And so one of the first things I teach, especially like I've taught this to a number of football players in the English Premier League. And I said, okay, this is the first thing you do. When you first wake up in the morning, even before you open your eyes, even before you look at your phone, which I hope you don't in the first thing in the morning, do this. Put your right hand on your heart, put your left hand over your right hand, and with your eyes closed, just take a nice deep breath and be grateful for the fact that you can take this breath and remind yourself that you're alive. I take it one step further and I take a nice deep breath when I first wake up in the morning. And I say, I'm grateful that I can take this breath because it'll allow me to be alive and impact more people today. And so that gives me the kind of sense of like, all right, this breath and this ability to breathe allows me to serve others. And that's how I make my days start. And so I'll start with the breath first, because some of them are like, okay, now you're making me think about like how I can impact lives, how I can serve others but I just want to know the basics. So we always go with basics first to keep it simple. And then if they feel like, okay, how can I make that even better? How can I improve that? How can I stack that even more? Then I add the service component, maybe add a presence component, maybe add a directional component, so like, oh, I'd say, I'm happy to be alive, so I can spend one more day with my family, one more day, or just keeping present a day. So it's really combining gratitude and mindfulness and making them together, because of the fact that, as you and I know, gratitude is the only emotion or variable that a human being feels that has no negative polarity. And that's what happens as your brain works. Like, you can't be grateful and then ungrateful at the same time. You can be happy and be sad with tears coming down your eyes. You could be joyful and have anger because, like, yeah, we won. You can do that, but you can't be like, I'm so grateful, I'm not grateful. You can't do both. You can't do both. Really, we're programmed. Our bodies are physically, our brains and bodies cannot do both. And so, but the one thing that researchers found is that there's a quite similarity with being in true, utter mindful state. And that's the one thing that's kind of similar. They're not exactly the same, because you have an intention with gratitude. Mindfulness is being just here. So being able to like combine both really creates this magical sense. And so that's why when you first wake in the morning, maybe I like move my feet first or whatever, and then move my feet and then set myself, and I do that. And so I start with that. I say, okay, this is something you do. And normally that's what we found as a good icebreaker for gratitude, particularly for, like I says, especially when it comes to team captains, of English Premier League football clubs, of I had one of the top golfers in the world, a pop star from Europe, like, yeah, people told me I need to write a gratitude journal. People need to like, it's like, no, let's hold on. Let's start with breathing. Let's just be thankful that you're alive because you took a breath this morning. And they're like, oh yeah, that's okay. So as you said, sometimes your head's in the clouds so much, as now you make sure that you remember that you have feet on the ground too. And so that's kind of one of the first things I go with, number one. Number two, for those who have already a journal practice, because sometimes that's the hardest thing. They're either A, you have a lot of these gratitude journals that then go deeper within, but those who are starting their practice, they just want the simple things. So funny enough, I found the perfect blend for that is doing, obviously, having a 5-minute journal. And this is something I've had a 5-minute journal for like, I don't know, like 7 years now. Funny enough, the founder of that was somebody I was with as part of a community for Reset in Canada. So the founder of 5-minute journal, and it was kind of so fascinating for intelligent change. And he's part of my Camp Reset community. And I realized like as simple as possible. If you feel that you need bigger prompts, longer prompts, yes, there's other journals out there. But in the end, we all want to do our minimal viable product as we start our days. And sometimes if you make it too much, then you almost, if you forget it, then you're like, oh, now I'm playing chase up.
Right.
I'm playing chase up. So rather than trying to do one big thing, I do what you call gratitude hack stacks or gratitude hack stacking, where we start with the breath, and then you do the journal, and then you do your thing in the toilet, bathroom, whatever, and then go back and do your meditation. So now you've stacked 3 things, which if you say, I only have time for taking a breath in the morning, then you already have that keyed in. If you have time for taking a breath and then journal, then you have 2 things. And then you add that, then you add little pieces. I mean, we live in a TikTok world now where people have 1.2 second, attention spans, or less than that, 0.8 second attention spans.
What'd you
If
say?
you tell them, sorry?
What'd you say? Sorry. That was more than a second. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's still more than a second. So to be able to like say, okay, give you little chunks and pieces, and it's up to you whether you want to have a la carte or have a buffet, but you leave it to the person to where they are in their development and / evolution on the world of gratitude.
Something that we have experimented with a lot is kind of group format gratitude. So I'm also curious to hear how, if at all, you incorporated that into like the team building and into like the trust building, within the team, both people at the same level, but also, management down to, employees. Just how have you incorporated it in a more social way?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've felt that has really worked for us and for me through Gratitude Gang, which we started doing live stuff with Gratitude Gang, is what I call like gratitude grounding sessions. And once again, it's the funny thing of combining, my practice of mindfulness and meditation for 35 years, plus plus this new side, the scientific part of gratitude. And it is what's have really worked is really the intimate settings of keeping whether it's 25, 20, it's really funny enough, the 20 to 30 sweet spot for me of people together when you're creating these group things.
Yeah.
In a live situation. I've done it with like 75 to 100, and I feel like people get lost when you do that. And and it's funny is because when I initially, it throws me back to when I first started going around the circuit of doing workshops and teaching with sports medicine concepts and stuff, when 2013, when I first started this, 2012, 2013. And I used to talk about, let's say, how to rehab the shoulder, but also have an element of kind of Burning Man and Tony Robbins at the same time. We call it happenings. And, we allowed surgeons and the highest level PhD professors to get out of their comfort zone, wear neon outfits, and talk about the shoulder while listening to rap music in the background, type situation.
Yeah.
And so what it takes me back is that what we looked at a lot of data from Montessori schools and from a lot of neuroscience stuff. And we found out that once your class goes beyond almost, I think, the 40-person mark, the amount of kind of learning or attention starts dropping. You go beyond 40, that attention starts dropping. And through the understanding of TED and the science of TED, the attention spans for a great speaker teacher is 18 minutes, and a not so great speaker is about 12 or 13. And so like, so you have to take that into consideration as you're doing these intimate sessions, that if you go beyond a certain mark with this amount of people, let's be honest, there's going to be a chunk of people that don't really care what you're talking about anymore after a 10-minute span. And I've had long conversations with one of my dear friends is Andy Padicom, who started Headspace, and he used to tell me that when he started Headspace, he started these meditations in England, he would always say that even though they got to a point of they were doing 1,000 people around England and these little meditation events, he can almost only guarantee that really at the end, one person will take action for what they talked about in the end. So almost like if your goal is to create all these massive things, in actuality, you're only going to have almost 1% or less than 1% that'll actually activate. And so it's better to keep an intimate situation that allows for people to be part of the program. And then there's this bond that gets created in that sense. Because even in big group situations, you go to Summit, you go to Burning Man, even you go to Mind Valley events, really the crew of people that you find yourself really getting to know are really ironically, 20 to 25, if that then you could leave and you go forward and be like, hey, I actually know that person well, and we actually shared a great situation. And so as you talked about, back to the question and saying like, how have you done it in that setting? It's like I take all of these things into account, and then I ask myself, in a team environment, I mean, my players, with basketball, there's 15 of them, 15 to 17, depending if our two ways were there. And then we included the coaches, included staff. So I still found myself in the 25, 30 person mark. And we would do this intimate pre-game breathwork meditations, which then I always infuse gratitude in them, or I always give a talk about gratitude in there. Or we did it before the games or during practice. And that still got those who weren't really too keen on it kind of interested, because then I have to think of something. Like, okay, I always bring them to a point where it reminded them of something that allowed them to find success, or somebody that took care of them in a sense. And for those who maybe are keen, now they're more curious. They'll say, hey, how can I add more stuff so that I can take this home? And when I get home, I can share this with my family. But there was definitely a closer interaction, because there was an ability to feel, I guess, safe and trust, not only of the facilitator, but also each other. Even though initially they're like, here we go again, whatever. But as they continue to practice, they realize the benefit of it, because then they'd see like, oh, we're actually liking each other more as a team. Two, we have better like chemistry when it's playing ball itself. And three, when they go home after a game, it's like they feel lighter. And so that could then, whether win or lose, they felt just lighter. And I feel like, if you add that to any person, whether you're an engineer working code or a CEO running a company, the fact that you end your day feeling lighter is already a win.
Yeah.
It's already a win.
Well, at the Grateful Giraffes, there's very few people who would roll their eyes, at that type of activation. Most people in our community are a part of it because they value gratitude and they want to be in an environment where people are not rolling their eyes, but rather encouraging this frequency, to be spread further. So for like a more advanced group, let's say one that's already been in the practice for a while and everyone's at, some level of gratitude practice, how would you take us on a journey? How would you advise me at our next event to create that space for the community so that they can take their gratitude to an even higher level in this collective way?
The one thing that I found, especially when it comes to the group situation, is to go deep on the question why. We're all grateful for something, but what I want to know is why. And I want you to tell me the story of why you're grateful and what's the true feeling you get that allows you to really not only understand that's your why, but why propagates throughout the rest of your life, because there's a deeper story behind it. And so when we've done these sessions that of people, especially with, like I've done this mostly, especially when it comes to like Mind Valley people who are already like so elevated with all their personal growth stuff. It's like, okay, I have a gratitude journal. Okay, I've gone to, Vipassana sessions for 10 days, and I've done all of that stuff. I've been a Burning Man. It's like, okay, what can we do? And I asked them, it's like, then, okay, share what you're grateful for. Get the setting really intimate, and then ask them why. And then ask them why again. Then ask them why again. And essentially bringing this coaching sense to the gratitude practice, because then you have the root of why gratitude fills their life. And that's what then will propagate outside of the session. And I think for me, that's what I found really. I've done a number of these type of, I guess, facilitations now. I think since pandemic has been over, it's a little bit more challenging doing this online. I've tried to do it online because some person could like go off the beaten path a little bit. And I experienced this when we were doing gratitude gang sessions on Clubhouse. Experimenting with just a small session of 5 to 10 people. Then when we started growing to like almost 50,000, you had 200, 300 people in a room, and you're just like, some people will be like, well, when is it going to be my turn? So now that sense of being grateful, they get pissed off. You're just like, okay, hold on, this not the point, So,
Yeah.
so so I think number one is going deep into the why. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Two, combine that sense of gratitude with something that then will hold that, like movement. And so how does gratitude play in anything that has to do with movement? And so for me, let's say for what I've done, let's say for like the basketball players, I would always say, besides taking a breath when you shoot your free throws, think of that person that makes you happy and how grateful you are for that person to be in your life. That's why, like, on practice, you see certain players in the past, they would say, do a little sign, whether it's like put their fingers here or do 3 dribbles, because they know that their kids are watching, because they want to remember them. But then I said, do that, but instead of you giving it to them, instead of you almost like, instead of like just showing you a sign of like, hey, I'm thinking of you, showing a sign that, hey, I love you guys. I'm really grateful for you guys to be in my life. Your wife, your kids, your girlfriend, your parents. And whether that's a sign, which is 3, know that that's a 3 balls, whether it's like a tap on the shoulder, whether it's a scratch in the head. Our old head coach, Jeff Hornacek, would do like, he would always like do this. And he was like, what the heck is he doing? But when he was back in Utah, and that was a sign, he would do this or something like, and that would assign to his wife and his kids that he was thinking of them. So add a movement, add like something that anchors this gratitude feeling, that allows that to happen. And so when I mean movement, I'm not meaning like, hey, let's feel grateful and let's do this, which is great. You can, which also works, but I'm talking about things that anchor you, things that like a movement that then solidifies that gratitude. It's an anchor, it's a thought. It's like, when I learned Silva method when I was like 13 years old, and 13 years old, and for those that don't know the Silva method, or the person that's cleaning the glass behind me, it's the Silva method was something that was started by a Portuguese immigrant that went to Texas, that was into whether a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon, that just couldn't understand why certain things that he did for his patients didn't work, and he decided to really go into the Eastern philosophy and make it Western, and then started selling it like Avon particularly to kids in like Southeast Asia. And I was a product of that. And Vishen Lakhiani, who started Mind Valley, was also a product of that. And it's really kind of funny. And so, and one of the things that you learn there is to anchor and using the 3 fingers and putting it in the side. And then so little things like that to then harness that. So anytime you feel that you're losing that sense of lightness within you, is that you hold these 3 things together, take a breath and be like, you know what? No matter how crazy this life is, I'm back here. That's one of those things. Number 2. And then and lastly, I think just as you said, yes, movement in whatever way, giving that sense of gratitude, because it's in the challenges, like doing a walk I think for me, it's one of my favorite things to do a 20-minute walk almost every day. And especially when we're out in the mountains and I just take a walk in this sense of, I just spent 2 weeks in Japan, and my favorite part is walking in the bamboo forest and the Seri-Nyoku practice of being forest bathing and noticing and savoring in every possible way. So you're moving and you have this thing above you and you're just like noticing everything and bringing the sense of mindfulness, but bringing that sense of gratitude with the mindfulness. And it really like
Yeah.
changes the way. So with regard to like an activity, these are all part of this woven situation for those who already have a practice on their own, whether that's by themselves or with a group.
Incredible. I will definitely be taking some notes from this talk to weave it into some of our upcoming events. So thank you for the inspiration. One thing you mentioned earlier that was kind of part and parcel of the Filipino culture was that either you're grateful and you don't have anything, or you're grateful and you do have something, and then are acting from a place of service. And I think that it's a very different culture than the one we're living in out here in the West. And I would just love to hear your commentary, just on, where we need to evolve to as a society, so that more people, are able to connect to gratitude even with less, and that those who have actually achieved a certain level of wealth or health or whatever they define as success are then able to switch their mindset versus more need to continue to compete. And I feel like this service mentality in some ways is at odds with this capitalist mentality where, it's just kind of like endless competition, endless, chasing for more and more, but a certain emptiness that comes along with it. Whereas service is actually what fills you, what actually gives you meaning and fulfillment, regardless of how much material wealth you have. So I'm already answering probably some of it, but I'd love to just hear how you look at this, given where you came from, where you've been, where you're at.
Yeah. So great question. A great, I guess, great thought process to ask. And I say this is because there's a good and a bad thing when there's a double. Having a service mentality is a double-edged sword, because in a place like the Philippines, we are in a sense a developing country, the service sometimes become an excuse for wanting to push the envelope higher. But at the same time, having a thought of service or being service mentality knows that what happens to you is that that everything that you do has a purpose, or there's always a direction to its going. So even though you I think sense like don't push the envelope enough, you don't reach, sometimes some people don't reach their goals in a financial manner, having this sense of service and gratitude for this moment knows that maybe there's hope that just by being you, well, then stars will align and fortune comes. So it's a weird double-edged sword of like, so one of the biggest challenges for me being Filipino American in the Philippines is trying to get people to say it's okay to be a little bit more selfish. I know everyone's in service. I'm a man of service. I understand. I have 2 nonprofits, and even even the work I do is in service. But you can be selfish so that you can have stuff for yourself, because in the end, part of being a server is to serve your family and to make sure that their lives are more comfortable than yours. And so it's a message that I constantly try. And this is an initiative I started in 2013 called Beyond Medyo. It was a little initiative I started here in the Philippines. Beyond Medyo means beyond mediocre. And because most Filipinos are okay with being mediocre, as long because that's what God wants, this is what God wills. But also at the same time, it's because of the fact that I don't have much. So I'm okay with being mediocre. Yes, the dreams, maybe hopefully my kids will have bigger dreams than me, but I'm okay with where I am. It's like, no. You yourself have to be okay with being selfish. Not to say that you're going to remove stuff from your kids and their future, but you need to make sure you're happy too. Because if your kids see you happy, then they'll be happy for you and with you. And so it's a double-edged sword being that. But on the flip side, the beautiful thing about this service culture and this culture of gratitude is that we love the simple things in life. We don't need to be on a yacht to make sure that our lives are good. We don't need to have fancy cars or a big house. We look at the simple things in life, just the air, a cool breeze, because sometimes it's so hot and humid that when a cool breeze arrives, it's like, ooh, it's so nice and cold. Like, ooh, you're like, ooh, and you get this sense of like, oh, wow, this is so nice that we get this. We don't get
Yeah.
this all the time that we're getting it now. Or there's a word called paminsan-minsan, which is like just once in a while, like when you have fiestas and you serve a whole roasted pig. And nowadays you can get it more often, but in the past when I was growing up, you only have a whole roasted pig during somebody's big birthday or a fiesta of a town. And people would say, oh, let's enjoy this. I'm so happy we can get this because paminsan-minsan lang. We can only this once in a while. So I think it's such a funny dichotomy that I live in as I guess, an American living in the Philippines, but also a Filipino living in the Philippines. And so it's like these two things that I sometimes struggle with, but it's the world I'm trying to blend together.
Are you getting your PhD in gratitude?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that too. Yes.
Yeah, I love
I'm
that.
on a break. Yeah, I'm on a break right now for a year because I a little challenged by the league that I was trying to get my data from because of all the legalities of what it takes to do any kind of research, which involves a professional organization slash league. And so I had to put that on pause for now. But yes, my whole goal was to try to figure out if gratitude affects the overall well-being and performance of high-performing athletes. But then one of the things that I realized, particularly as the years have gone by, is that the athletes are being taken care of already. Why don't we try to find a way to understand how the people that serve the athletes are feeling? How is their performance? How is their overall well-being? And so what moved from an athlete-centric PhD has turned into a human or people servant, ironically, servant-centric PhD, where now it's the impact of a gratitude mindset on the overall well-being of the athletic trainers and the strength and conditioning coaches that work in the NBA, the people that serve these athletes, because burnout is real and burnout still is real. And I think it's about time that people start talking about the people that take care of others. And I think that might be the world I'm really living in, and I will live in, because that's who I am, who I've evolved into as a mentor, as a teacher, as a guide, as a coach. Is like, I want to make sure we take care of the people that take care of the other people.
Yeah.
And so that's what my PhD is going into, and how gratitude affects their well-being throughout an NBA season. You're grateful you have a job at the beginning of the season, all this hype, all this beauty, all this thing. But as the season goes, you're like, do you really still like this job? You don't get to see your family anymore. Are you still grateful? Is there still something within you? Or are you able to harness that sense to then make you feel like your well-being continues to stay? And so my goal is to look and capture this throughout a season and see where that lies. And then in the end, find applications of how we can improve that through certain techniques, through hacks, through some of the techniques I just showed and talked about earlier.
Cool. Well, I support you finishing that experiment and excited
You'll have
to.
to ask the league to like make sure that they get this approval done, because they're like, it's been 6 months and I haven't, we're still trying to get the stuff approved.
Well, we're manifesting that reality for you as a fellow community member. So we support your efforts academically. And one of our big missions out here in Giraffe Land is, well, how can we scale gratitude to as many people as possible, and usher in a shift in the culture we live in and the consciousness that we experience collectively. What are some of your thoughts on how to scale gratitude, or how to sort of get mass adoption of some of these practices and mindsets?
Great question. And I will direct this to what Gratitude Gang has now evolved into. What started as a community on Clubhouse that reached about almost 50,000 people, that turned into an NFT project, that you were obviously there, part of that journey, to now a full-on nonprofit focusing on the mental health of kids in the Philippines. And what we've evolved into now is the understanding of where the biggest challenges are for mental health and how a sense of gratitude can help with that. But you have to look at the reality in the practical sense. And what we found is that if you need to make change, you have to make these changes even when babies aren't born yet, in the bellies of mothers, in challenged areas, in places like the Philippines, in the islands, in the mountains, and indigenous peoples. And, you know, what we've kind of evolved to now with Gratitude Gang is we're looking at what is the biggest factor for why mental health, actually mental illness occurs, or the challenge of mental health occurs. And we've discovered that it's nutrition.
Wow.
Getting just enough food for these mothers to be able to feed their babies in their belly, or these mothers to feed their babies as they're out of their belly in the first 1,000 days. Because in the Philippines, we've found out that 91% of kids become, in a sense, illiterate by after 6th grade. Their brains physically cannot really hold the wisdom, strangely enough to say that, past 6th grade, because the illiteracy rate is so high, because they don't get the nutrition in the first 1,000 days of their life.
Wow.
And so now what we've done is partnered with local kind of on the ground communities. Gratitude Gang as a nonprofit now, we're basically like an overall umbrella of different micro nonprofits that are on the field. One in the in the mountains for indigenous kids, which I just came from this past 2 days. I spend a lot of time up in the mountains nowadays, so helping these indigenous kids to be able to do feeding programs and, you know, serve them, you know, rice porridge with ginger and chicken and stuff like that, just to have something in their bellies, and that then helps their mind to be able to grow. And number 2, in the island of Siargao, which I'll be in 2 weeks, where expected mothers, and through a foundation called Collectivo, who was started by a friend of mine from Vancouver, or Toronto, from Canada, and she moved to the island on the ground to be able to help expected mothers get their supply of food in whatever form that is, through vegetables or whatever, so that then when the babies are born, their brains are forming better already from the get-go. And that's how we feel. By having that, then you'll be able to have that sense of gratitude and understanding, where it's not just a word, but it's an action. It's an actual thing that people can eat. What is that? And then I think that's how we plan, you know, for my little part of the world, to really scale what Gratitude Gang is, and what gratitude is in general, is to be able to give the gift of wisdom retainment, in a sense, for these kids as they grow up, to understand how valuable it is to use their brains, and that the fact that they can use their brains, unlike those who have come before them.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, first of all, kudos, for the initiative and the work. And I'm sure, it's insane how many people are grateful for you at this point. Um, and I think there's obviously different segments of the population. Those who aren't even getting their basic food needs met, it would be hard for them to experience gratitude. But there also are a lot of people who have their basic needs met, who are also, acting from a very different place mentally, and also suffering. So how do we address those segments?
The biggest challenge for anyone going through suffering is to see the what's the phrase, like, see the forest through the trees, or
Yeah.
through the is that correct? I said see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, forest through the trees. And I think be able to create awareness of what that means, and where gratitude takes place, and the simple things that can be done, so that then the understanding of what gratitude can do for your life, through some of the studies that are out there, and maybe some of the future studies I'll be creating, will be something I think is of big importance. And so for the educational part of it is pretty massive. And being able to have as many people to talk about this in in a format for which people can consume it, and
Yeah.
fortunately or unfortunately that means social media, and to be able to create more stories
Yeah.
with the use of social media. In today's world, TikTok is the quickest one, and maybe YouTube for long format stories, and being able to have people share their stories, and so that those who consume them. And I say that because, I mean, funny enough, the Philippines has now been ranked the #1 vlogging consumer in the planet. Number one, it's number one. Can you believe that? I'm not shocked. Everyone is watching vlogs.
Wow.
Number one. Number two, we are we are the most we have the most usage of social media in the planet. We're #1 in the planet too, of people that use social media, or whether
Wow.
using it or doing it. And even at one point in time, we had the most amount of selfies taken in the central business district. I think we averaged 100,000 selfies taken a week.
Wow.
We love our social media. And so just from my learnings, one of the things that, in order for people to understand, those, let's say, yes, who have enough, and I say that because some of my clients that I work with, or some of my friends and people who have asked me these questions, are not, some of them are well-to-do, and they just said but you're right, some of them are still in a sense suffering because they can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
And so it's about creating this awareness and telling these stories, and maybe creating little educational things and hints that allows them to see that. And I think that's one of the ways to expand. And I think funny I say this is because I think it's you have to use a minimal viable product to then expand at scale. And when you're able to do that and hit that, then the awareness of what gratitude can do for people's lives will really be out there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that really resonates with our approach as well, because we think, the giraffe eventually is a storyteller and, can become synonymous with gratitude. And then, you see Kim Kardashian with a giraffe swimsuit, and then you see, you know, some crazy New York City billboard with giraffe print on it, and then you see Elon Musk driving a giraffe print Tesla, and so there is a way we think through this giraffe symbolism that we can tell the story at scale and reach a lot of people with this positive message.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're not the only people who are passionate about it, so there's lots of different ways to tell this story. Um, that being said, it's a very important story to tell, given where we're at in our trajectory and where we are socially right now, and just how much chaos there seems to be around the world. It really feels like gratitude is something that can universally connect us.
Mm-hmm.
It really cuts through all religion and race and age and gender and all the things that we're being told separate us, but at our core, we are all part of the same family, all part of the same planets, all part of the same star light, star dust, so yeah, I think gratitude is one of those really important stories that needs to become a lot more presence in the collective consciousness. And I think conversations like this, are just part of the surge, that needs to be created. So
I concur, my friend. I concur highly.
yeah. So any closing thoughts before we end the show?
Any closing thoughts? I think I know you probably have everyone say this, to find a way to make gratitude as part of your daily habit, so to speak. And I say that just because I think people will try it, will test it, but you need to make it a habit. You need to be able to do something for at least 3 weeks, as they say, 21 days or a month, and to really incorporate that in your life for those who don't have it yet. And B, it's okay to start small. It's just like doing an exercise. I think too many people are so caught up on the bigness of everything. Everything has to be grand. Everything has to be big. Oh yeah, I'm changing. I'm doing this 7-day challenge for gratitude now. I want you all to join me because I'm going to change my life too. It's like, You don't have to. It's okay. It's like just wake up in the morning and be grateful that you're breathing,
Yeah.
and try to do that consistently. It literally will change your life. And I think those are the two things that I feel like making it habit, and doing small things and atomic habits, and little tiny things that allow you to do that, to be able to have gratitude as part of your life. And lastly, I think one of the things that I've kind of also learned is, and going back to my initial thread and thought process and quote, is that we can't force gratitude upon people. They have to discover it themselves. Maybe we can introduce it, just like in planting a seed, but we can't force them to do that. We can't do it for them. We have to have them realize how important it is and the effect it does for them, and be okay with it. I think that's the biggest challenge. So yeah, so there's three things basically, is as we round this up, and yes, of course, a shameless plug for Gratitude Gang and where we are now. Sunflowers abound everywhere, but now the new website that's coming up soon will have a different feel. Will be focused on the mental health of kids in the Philippines, and then the importance of nutritional component. I'm not saying that we're going to feed the whole country. I'm just saying that it's important to create awareness of the importance of food in general for kids in their first 1,000 days, so that then illiteracy rates drop, particularly in my own home country.
Absolutely. Erwin, we are grateful for your presence and your time and your wisdom, and thank you so much for sharing it. I'm looking forward to waking up tomorrow and having one of those deep Erwin breaths, and just reminding myself of the gift of life first thing with my eyes closed. So thank you so much for that tip, and for your time.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure and honor as a fellow giraffe and somebody who's been part of this journey since the beginning. It's a
Straight up,
journey.
straight up.
It's a journey. It's a journey and an honor, my friend, always.
Likewise. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards.
Thank you.
Aho.
Thank you so much.